Hey, what's up guys? Thanks for clicking on this video. Now if you followed my channel for a little bit, you're probably aware that I like me some German timepieces. And today we're going to be discussing the latest addition to my collection, the Sinn U50, which is kind of known as the little brother or more compact version to their most popular diver, the Sinn U1. Now near the second quarter of 2020, Sinn actually updated their catalog with a few different timepieces, and the U50 was one of them. And this one has actually been very elusive to get a hold of. I think it sold very well through the online retailers in the US and in Canada. And I was lucky enough to actually pick up this watch secondhand from another watch enthusiast in one of the Canadian Watch Club forums. So while I'm not the original owner of this watch, one of the things I love about Sinn is that they over-engineer their timepieces, and this watch remains in excellent condition. So why don't we flip perspectives now, and you guys can take a close-up look at this watch in my studio for the review portion of this video. Alright, so now that we're in the studio, we can take a closer look at the Sinn U50. So I want to start off by talking about the case dimensions and why this is a lot more compact than the Sinn U1. Starting with case diameter, it's 41 millimeters across the case. At the side shot here, lug to lug between my thumbs is about 47 millimeters. Now it does extend a little past 47 if you include the articulation for the supplied bracelet to about closer to 50, but this watch also looks killer on a strap. Now the most surprising measurement, being that this is a 500 meter dive watch, is how thin it is. It comes in at a case thickness of 11.2 millimeters. That's from the bottom of the case back to the top of the sapphire crystal, which is very flat and carries a gorgeous anti-reflective application, not only on the underside of a crystal but on the top side as well, that give you these amazing viewing angles where the crystal seems to disappear. And then I do want to mention the lug gap here for the supplied H-link bracelet is 20 millimeters, and it does carry drilled lug holes for easy changing of a bracelet onto a strap. And I quickly want to mention that between the lugs here on the 6 o'clock side, there's the engraving SUG, which I've never seen on about the half of dozen Sinn watches I've owned. But I quickly learned that SUG is basically the initials in German for the case manufacturer that was established in 1998 that Sinn went with to help with some of their proprietary technologies. And they are based in Glashütte, Germany, which is also the home to some of the best German brands like A. Lange & Söhne, Nomos, and Glashütte Original. So that's just a quick tidbit of trivia for you. If you see that engraving on the case, you know what it is. The English translation for the company basically stands for Saxony Watch Technologies. Now, I think one of the reasons that Sinn was able to get this case so thin is that, if I'm not mistaken, the automatic movement they utilize is a Sellita SW300, which is very similar to a Sellita SW200 that they've used in the U1 and countless other Sinn models. But the difference is that it is slightly thinner. The movement thickness for the SW300 is 3.6 millimeters, and it's a 25 joule movement, gets you just over 40 hours of power reserve, and it's a high beat movement coming in with a 28,800 vibrations per hour, and it's hacking and hand wind as well. Now, I'm always impressed with how well Sinn regulates the accuracy of their movements. So the tolerance on this guy, I've measured this anecdotally at only picking up about 2.5 seconds per day. Now, the design DNA of the Sinn U1 remains with the U50 in terms of a dial layout. You got those iconic blocked off kind of syringe style minute and hour hands, and then you can see the squared off point to the seconds hand there as it reaches the very periphery of a dial. Now for the hour markers, you have simple rectangles that also have a bit of a raised edge towards the minute track there. And orientation is very good because at the 12 o'clock you have a longer dual rectangle. And you also have a date aperture at the 3 o'clock position, which is integrated very well because they kind of truncated that hour marker at the 3, but the overall real estate that it takes up for the date cutout is about the same as the 6 and 9 o'clock markers on the dial. So very nice symmetry to this dial. It is extremely legible because this is all printed in white, and the dial colorway itself is black with a very fine grainy texture that's not very visible to the naked eye. As far as printing go, it's very minimal. You do have the Sinn in cursive near the 12 o'clock position, and then closer to 6 you have U50 automatic spelt in German, and then you have that 500-meter depth rating. And another added feature that's very subtle is I like how they blacked out the Made in Germany text. Now, if we talk about the bezel quickly, this model is the U50 SDR, which has the fully tegmented bezel, and I think it's PVD coated as well. Whereas you could also get the Sinn with the non-tegmented bezel, or you can get the full thing blacked out in PVD and fully tegmented, and that doesn't just include the bezel, it includes the case and the H-link bracelet as well. Now, as far as the bezel goes, I really like that they have this oversized marker at the 12 o'clock position that's loomed to go with the loom that's supplied on the dial and hand stack. And I'll throw up a low light shot now too, just so you can see how well this watch lights up. It's not as potent as some other divers in my collection, but the longevity of a loom is actually quite impressive. Now, this bezel is fixed into place by tiny screws, so it's a captive style bezel, similar to what you would find on Breitling's, and it's a 60-click unidirectional bezel. And whereas some people in the past have complained that they found that the U1 had a quite loose bezel with some backplay, this one just goes off like a machine gun. It's very audible, and the tolerances are fairly tight, but you can really feel each click very well, and there is no backplay here once it's locked into place. So I do think that they refined the bezel action, and it's much better on the U50 relative to the U1. Now, if we talk about the case, it's purely a bead blasted finish, and this is using submarine grade stainless steel. It isn't tegmented, but it's fairly scratch resistant and extremely corrosion resistant. You can see the crown itself is off-centered to closer to the 4 o'clock position, and there's no crown guards, but just the way the lug and the belly of the case go here, you do have some guarding action, and it's oversized, so it's very easy to operate. I really enjoy it. It's got a nice satisfying pop, and you can see just that crown tube there is very secure. It's not moving at all. Now, if you're familiar with any Sinn sports models, the H-link bracelet and clasp is going to be very familiar to you. In fact, if anything, I think maybe they could update it a little. Not so much the bracelet, because I think it's bulletproof. It's a 3-link style H-link bracelet, very good articulation. And sizing this is always very secure. You got hex-sided screws on both sides of the bracelet, and they do give you the hex tools needed to adjust it. But the clasp itself, I mean, by this point, I think it's a little outdated. It works very well. You just got this security fold-over mechanism here. It is milled out, but the clasp itself feels a little bit stamped out. Now, you'll note at the side of a clasp, there are about 3 different micro-adjustment anchoring points here, but for whatever reason, the previous owner appeared to have drilled an extra micro-adjustment hole here. So if it looks funny to you, that's why. It doesn't affect the overall security of a clasp at all, but I think he did that just to fine-tune the adjustment a little more. And there is also an all-or-nothing diver's extension here that's nicely milled out, and it fits securely under the pressed part of a clasp. Now, if we look at the underside of the watch, you can see that the case back is also bead blasted. You do have solid end links for the bracelet. The case back is screwed down for that 500-meter water resistance rating. And it does give you some information. This does come with some of the Sinn technologies that meet requirements for diving and being anti-magnetic and shock resistant. But let's take a look at how this watch wears on my 7.5-inch wrist. So in case you're wondering, 7.5 inches translates into about a 19 centimeter circumference wrist. And this watch wears extremely compact and flat on my wrist, which really helps with the comfort of this watch. I really do notice how thin this watch is, specifically for a 500-meter diver. And to me, the H-Link bracelet is a tried and true bracelet that's very durable and very comfortable at the same time. Now, before I get to pricing and the conclusions for this video, are there any negative elements that could be potentially improved down the road? Now, I am going to be nitpicking here, but how they printed on the indices, but more specifically, how they painted the handset, isn't as crisp as I think you would find on some Swiss luxury brands, especially when they're separating the red from the white sections on the handset. You can see that the lines of delineation aren't as clear. And then lastly, I do wish that they refined the clasp a little bit here, so you have some toolless form of micro adjustment, and that the finishing of the clasp itself is updated a little bit. This is the same clasp that's been used for over a decade now by Sinn for their H-Link bracelets. And it does work, but I do think it could use a little bit of updating after this long. Now, as I alluded to at the beginning of the video, this watch has kind of been hard to come by near the end of 2020 and the start of this year. But if you want to purchase this watch through a Canadian authorized dealer, it's going to run you over 3,900 Canadian. Now, I do think it's worth that price, but something to note is that Sinn has been steadily increasing the prices for many of their models. And at this price point, you are getting some competition from some Swiss luxury divers. One watch I want to bring in to compare would be the Breitling Super Ocean. These guys are very similar in dimensions, although the Breitling is a 42mm case. They both carry 500 meters of water resistance, but if you look on the gray market, you can probably pick up a new Breitling Super Ocean for about the same price as a brand new Sinn U50. And another popular competitor would probably be the brand Tudor. I currently have a Tudor Pelagos in my collection, which again, also a 500-meter dive watch, although it's quite a bit thicker than the Sinn U50 and will cost you a little bit more. But guys, to close out the video, I do have to say that on the whole, I'm very impressed with the Sinn U50. Even with my wrist size, which is a little bit larger and can probably pull off the U1, I would still go towards the U50 because it is thinner, the bezel action is more refined, and let's be honest here, I'm not going to be diving anywhere close to 500 meters, so it's more than enough water resistance for me. I hope you guys are staying safe during these times, and as always, I'll catch you in the next video.